Right, we're back. We're back live. Sorry there if for the cutout it was we just got because the background music we were using a no copyright radio stream, but apparently somebody's put copyrighted music on there. So our apologies. Anyway, if you were listening before and you've just joined us again, check out the link, share the link to everybody. Anyway, Sammy, what were you talking about? Carry on.
Yeah, so basically all these countries coming together and all of these events happening in such a short period of time, this definitely indicates something is in the making. The first one being like the tripling or quadrupling of Iranian military cargo shipments to Syria since the Latakia port incident.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have like Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Iran attending Nicaragua's presidential inauguration ceremony and having talks between them. And then today, the Iranian foreign minister visiting China and the Iranian president due to visit Russia in a few days. And then, like, everything happening in Kazakhstan, like Russia, like with the CSTO just absolutely smashing out the Western color revolution attempt. And after that, Russia and China like coming even closer together and like giving out joint statements that they are against this color revolution in like using these words as well. And both Iran and Russia like are like wishing luck for the Beijing Winter Olympic Games, which isn't really supposed to be something political, but the West has made political. So even on that, they're like coming closer together even.
Yeah,
and
because
then,
I mean, I don't want to speculate on the situation that unfolded in Kazakhstan last week because, like, it's one of those things that not everything's known of yet. But
yeah.
It was very strange. Well, not strange, but like groundbreaking of how quick CTSO and allies responded, and also to see like China's president Xi actually make a statement on it. And not only make a statement on it, but use language like colour revolution and stuff,
Because
I think the thing is, like,
yeah, go on, Tom.
Sorry, I was going to say, like, I think what we're seeing is because America is becoming weak and isolated internationally, and its allies are falling by the day. Countries that were previously allied to it, or at least nominally allied to it, are either becoming non-aligned, saying they will not fight China, they will not fight Russia. All of the cannon fodder America usually uses is refusing to become cannon fodder for this great American project that they're trying to do. This great battle against the evil Asians in Russia and China and Central Asia and the Middle East and all of these places. Sorry, West Asia. You've got this kind of situation where, although the China-Russia axis, as it were, is not in itself gaining new support, all of America's allies are distancing themselves from America because they know that it's a losing fight. So,
because I mean, an example of that is Kazakhstan, right? Because the country's been like both siding itself because it's been putting its own interests first since the dissolution of the USSR, right? Kazakhstan was the last bastion of socialism in of the USSR, right? It was the last place to be liquidated, and the current landscape economically is that it's a capitalist country, right? It has dealings with all the Western oil companies, all sorts, right? So it's not so much that it's like, what's the word, anti-imperialist, right? But it's more that it's like it's putting its own interests before the interest of the companies that it's doing business with, right?
The companies that basically come in and loot other countries of the world.
No, I mean they're happy to. What I'm trying to say is, Kazakhstan can do deals with these big oil companies, but they're going to be done on an equal footing. Not like the oil companies are going to be able to put their own government up and then buy it out like they do in the West. That it's not going to happen.
I think the thing with Kazakhstan is because it's an ex-Soviet republic, and obviously still has a lot of the the Soviet era infrastructure in place, insofar as like all of the ex-Soviet republics have far more state ownership than any Western country today. Like it's interesting to me when people say like, oh, you know, it's a like
Yeah. Well, I mean, even Germany, you just use Germany as an example of that, right? The welfare state that West Germany has, capitalist leader of the EU, West Germany has, is completely inherited from like socialist DDR. Like
yes, exactly.
So it's only that. What you're talking about is only that.
Well, yeah, and but what I mean is, because of this, like when like as you and Sammy rightly pointed out there, that there's a lot of Kazakhstan's oil industry, which is one of its largest industries, is dominated by American oil companies, right? So the interests went both ways. Under Nazarbayev, the previous president, it was very much so let's play both sides. You know, let's stay with Russia for physical security. We'll be in all these military alliances with Russia, all these diplomatic alliances with Russia. However, we will put most of our economic capital in the hands of the West, because they're the big guys on campus, as it were.
Exactly.
Now, as China's started to rise and become more and more important, and obviously is one of their neighbors, they're like, well, now we might need to be thinking about a bit of a realignment. We're going to go with the PRI. We're going to go with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and they started to drift more into the Eurasian sphere rather than playing both sides neutrally, which is why Tokayev was basically brought to power. Tokayev, the current president. Now, Tokayev, it's interesting, not many people know this. His job previously was he was the chief diplomatic service officer for the Kazakh Soviet Republic during the Soviet Union days in Beijing. So he speaks Kazakh, he speaks Chinese, and he speaks Russian all fluently, right? So when he was brought in, it was kind of seen as a bit of a, right, we need someone who knows China, someone who knows Russia, so that we can start dealing with this a bit more cohesively. Now, regardless of what the intentions of the Colour Revolution were, we don't know because it was defeated, so we'll never know what the actual intentions were. But the removal of Tokayev was the most important part, right? That was what all of the NGOs were calling for. It's what all the violent rioters were calling for. And what this has actually done, because of the swift reaction of the CSTO, of the Kazakh army, the consolidation of the Kazakh state under Tokayev, as he took away the military operation from previous President Nazarbayev. I'm saying a lot of Kazakh names now. I hope people can follow. What essentially happened now is Kazakhstan has been firmly pushed into the Eurasian alliance and is never going to trust the West again. I mean, don't get me wrong, they will still deal with Western oil companies. It's not like they're going to kick them out or anything like that.
Yeah, but it's done on their terms now. It's not like they're not going to have the say. That's what it's about, isn't it? Same with China, done right? China has no problem. I mean, it's the same with Russia, right? This is the whole thing with Russia. They're willing. They've got no problem doing business with America or Britain, but it's not going to be done one-sided, is it? That's what it's all about. It's all about making sure that this is a mutual decision making, not just like decision making that favours the West because the West has hegemonic, influence. It's just that. So anyway, back to what Sammy was saying, because we need to get on to the main. We need to get on to the next bit of the show. These incidents happening around the world. I mean, I think there's definitely a uptake in response time. Carry on.
I just wanted another event. Well, a thing that has been going on, which is Yemen. And recently, there have been two major defensive operations that have taken place on the side of the Yemeni army and the popular committees, or Ansarullah. They managed to push back against two major offensives by basically the puppets and the Saudi and UAE backed forces. Even about 3 days ago, they announced that they killed 515 from the UAE and Saudi backed ISIS and other militias. 515 fell dead of them, which is a pretty substantial figure. And not to mention all the hardware that they lost and all the prisoners of war that they captured and all that stuff. So it was pretty significant defeat, and 2 of those in a row.
Nice.
And concerning Maghreb, which is kind of like the most important location strategically.
Yeah. All roads sort of flow from there, right?
Exactly, yeah. They are taking that very carefully. Like they're doing negotiation. Basically what's happening is that the Saudi-backed forces are taking like the civilians in the region as hostages, basically. And it's like a very sensitive situation there. So what the Yemeni army and popular committees are doing is that they're kind of like waiting this out and focusing more of their efforts onto the other fronts, mainly the southern front and the northern front, as we've seen.
When you say they're taking them hostage, you mean like hiding behind them, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. It's
Like
kind
it's
of like
still
what
a
the British did in Ireland.
Exactly, yeah. It's still a densely populated civilian area, and sporadically we have some defections from the puppets to the popular committees here and there, but mostly the Yemeni army and popular committees are like waiting this out and also resorting to diplomatic solutions for this. And also Iran put forward I don't know what the official name was for it was, but it was like the peace proposal for Yemen, and what it includes is the bullet points that includes basically number 1, lifting of the entire blockade off of Yemen, and allowing trade by sea, by air, by land, opening all those roads, and having a comprehensive and inclusive government that would take care of the matters of Yemen, and as well as economic support. It doesn't mean obviously economic support in the style of the IMF. It's going to be like proper economic support, giving them means to stand up on their feet, especially agriculturally, and that's on top of the military help that Iran has been giving Yemen, to the point that now Yemen even produce their own air defense missiles, which is how they shoot down the very advanced drones that the UAE has.
Now, when you say Iran wants to hold on, Vito, when you say Iran wants to negotiate peace, like, and have like a national sort of government, do they want to create like a Lebanon situation, right?
And
where
no,
both
not
sides...
exactly. Not exactly, because Lebanon and Yemen are like the regimes that are very different.
Yeah, but what I mean, they're almost opposite, aren't they? But
what do you mean?
what I mean is the alternative to the contradictions in Lebanon politically is war, right? So it's always better to have sides like try and sort out their differences democratically and
actually
through discussion. I mean,
yeah,
like in China as well, you know, China, you have to sit down with your enemy sometimes and deal with stuff, or the alternative is you have like a long drawn out 10-year long civil war, right?
Yeah, but the thing is about Lebanon, just to briefly touch on this, is that the political system there was like originally drawn up by France.
Yeah. Well, what I mean, that's what I mean. In opposite, Lebanon has almost been created with the imperialist in mind. Whereas if this was to be done in a place like Yemen by Iran, right, it would be the opposite, because it would be the opposite side who had like created it. That's what I'm getting at, Sammy. I don't want you to think I mean another just like copy of Lebanon.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And but the thing is, like, the other sides need to quote unquote agree on this, and those sides include Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Britain as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, but in the end, they will be forced into doing so, because it's either dragging on, like draining Saudi Arabia even more in Yemen, or it's like the political process, that they go to, which is what Iran is suggesting of having an encompassing government of all sides, basically.
Exactly. That's what I'm getting at.
It also kind of means, but either way, like the popular committees are winning, either direction this takes, even like if it's by the political path.
Yeah. It's almost like Iran is offering the other side a peace, right? Because knowing that the alternative is they lose militarily, right?
Yes, the alternative is they'll lose politically, which is kind of less.
Well, no, it's lose politically but claim your stake along the way, or lose military and lose everything, right?
Yeah,
that's what it comes to. And they tried the same in Lebanon, but obviously the opposite way around, where it's the capitalist class saying to like the popular movements, right, okay, now we're democratic, you have a voice now, right? Okay, so you can come and lose in this way rather than lose by beating us in war. It's the same thing.
Pretty much. And yeah, just
wasn't there some sort of meeting in Palestine as well about
not a meeting, but more of an uprising.
Wasn't there a meeting not an uprising, wasn't there a meeting between various resistant groups on the Palestine question as well?
Yes, actually a few months ago it took place in Syria, where Syria invited all of the resistance factions basically to Syria to have like talks with each other and such.
Mm-hmm.
And Syria like announced that they will have good relations with whatever Palestinian resistance faction, which includes Hamas, by the way, because Hamas kind of took the wrong side of history when the color revolution in Syria took place.
Yeah.
So now they're like talks of re-establishing ties and such, and it'll be interesting how this spans out. Also, there's an uprising in the Palestinian desert of Naqab. That's because
Is this the Bedouins?
yes, it's the Bedouins. The Israelis are using the excuse of forestation, which is the complete opposite of what they've been doing for the past 70 years.
Right, okay. Right, Sammy, I'm going to have to cut you short and we'll come back to this theorem on another episode, right? But what's the overall point of what you wanted to discuss tonight? Go on, wrap it up, exactly. Because we've talked about some losers for the last like half an hour.
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's all right. Don't worry. We got stuck talking about winning, so you know, don't fret.
Yeah.
These can go down as our winners, right?
I can do another hour and a half. Yeah. Stream's still running.
Okay, right. So basically, in a nutshell,
I can do it an hour and a half rather than just half an hour. If you want to continue till 12:30.
All right, cool. We'll carry on for a bit longer. Yeah, sure. Come on, Sammy.
Cool. So basically, in a nutshell, all of these events that have taken place about 2 weeks in the span about.
Oh no, you've forgotten the main point, right? Which is Syria joining the Belt and Road.
Yes,
touch on that.
That is actually the last point on the list I had of events, significant events happening.
Exactly. So let's just fast forward to that, and we can come back to the other events next week.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that like all these events, they signify something that is in the works, basically, and also like the Chinese will have kind of more involvement in Syria, so to speak, because I think that now that Syria stood up on its feet.
What's happened to? Because I'm pretty sure Syria wanted to join like a long time ago, but China was like, you need to be. We're not going to invest in an unstable country, right?
Exactly, yeah. That's because of the instability that Syria still had. But now that Syria has stood up on its feet, consolidated in the elections, and now they seem to have a bit of a more fierce answer for the Israeli attacks, which we'll be seeing soon. I think they are feeling safer in like investing in Syria and such. And I think this is the point where, as the analyst Anis Naqash, who passed away, he said that very soon in the future, within like a few years, Syria will witness a resurgence economically and prosperity to the degree that most of the refugees will be returning, especially considering the conditions in Europe are going to be deteriorating in the next few years. And I think this is the starting point for that.
Well, the
I
conditions
think
in
as
Europe
well-
are definitely deteriorating. Go on, Tom.
I was going to say, like, with regards to China's investment, it's probably a matter of, obviously we know how vehemently America opposes the Belt and Road Initiative. So any infrastructure that the BRI began to construct whilst there was still an ongoing and brutal civil war would become probably target number one after direct Syrian government infrastructure. The secondary target would immediately become BRI infrastructure. And it's also worth remembering that there's a significant number of ETIM fighters. The majority of ETIM's remaining base is currently in Syria because it's been defeated in China. They still have
see China help the Syrian government in dealing with that as well. Do you think we'll see
Maybe
the Chinese
only on a
government help?
technical level, they will be.
China won't ever give direct military aid, and we should never really expect this. However, we can certainly expect what's the word? Military.
They might lay a train line that the Syrian army can use to move supplies to that area quicker, though, right?
Yeah. There's always ways around it. Like, they will build infrastructure that can be used for military purposes, but they won't say you should use this for military purposes. They may also. China has just become a large market for cheap fighter jets. When I say cheap, I don't mean cheap in terms of quality. I mean cheap in terms of price. They're much cheaper than Russian and American fighter jets. And currently, the only countries that are buying them are countries that can't really afford the Russian ones, because American ones are even more expensive yet again. But
countries used to do with Soviet jets and tanks.
Yeah, sort of. But like with Pakistan has just bought 38 J-10C fighter jets, which are some of China's more advanced fourth generation fighters, and they're kind of like analogous to F-15s or F-16s in terms of their kind of quality. So they're decent fighter jets. They're really powerful things. Pakistan bought them specifically to counter India's Rafale fleet. Rafales are France's most advanced fighter jet. This might sound boring, but the important thing here is that China, as an emerging exporter of military technology, can assist countries like Syria without having to actually put boots on the ground. Like, how I see the China-Russia alliance, I don't like using that word because they specifically say that they are not in an alliance, but for all intents and purposes, they are. How I see it is, China is the economic arm of the alliance and will fund the countries that come to join them, whereas Russia will be the hard military power side of the alliance, which is what we saw in Kazakhstan. When aid was requested, China said, we will help, but they didn't send Chinese troops. They offered investment aid, basically really, really cheap engineering restructuring for all of the buildings that were destroyed in the riots, whilst Russia sent in their boots on the ground, as was requested, by the way. Some people have made out that this was an invasion, but the sovereign leader of Kazakhstan literally asked for it. It's a bit like the Syria situation. When a sovereign leader invites your army into the country to help them restore order, that is a legitimate thing. It's the equivalent of like a revolutionary situation happening in the UK, and then fucking Boris Johnson calling on Joe Biden to deploy.
What it's the equivalent of is it's the equivalent of the UK defending France, right, when Germany invaded it in World War II. You class Britain of invading France, right? They invaded German occupied France the second time, but the first time before they got chased to Dunkirk, right? You won't call that an invasion. They just entered the war. Like, France was like, yeah, come. You have permission to move through France. That's not an invasion.
Yeah. Of course.
Carry on.
That's what I'm getting. I mean, like the what I refer to as the Eurasian Pact or the Eurasian Alliance, which is gaining more and more members as the days go by. Some of them not even in Eurasia. There's quite a lot of African countries that are basically party to this quote-unquote alliance. Is essentially you've got two big players. You've got Russia, who is still the ground forces champion of the world. Like, Russian ground forces are pretty much unbeatable anywhere in the world. China and Russia, if they had a hypothetical war, would probably meet at a stalemate because China's forces are larger, but Russia's are much more well trained insofar as they've been in much more real combat situations. They've got much more experience, and Russian ground technology is really advanced. Now, China is the undisputed economic heavyweight of the world, more so than America. China can afford to throw trillions and trillions of dollars around to assist other countries with rebuilding, with infrastructure, with whatever. The USA can't do this. I mean, they can, but they choose to
building like multiple aircraft carriers at once.
Yes, yeah.
In record
but that's the
time.
Thing. yeah.
Whilst building like how many hospitals to fight COVID, whilst blah blah blah, you know.
Yeah, I mean, China's economy is undoubtedly the most powerful economy in the world, and I think that is in large part due to the fact that it's government controlled as well.
Not just largest, but able to respond. One thing the US economy could never do was respond to the needs of the US empire, right? That's why they lose wars like Vietnam and stuff, and Iraq again, because their economy can't sustain the time it takes for these imperialist wars to go on. Whereas if you're not an aggressive imperialist and you actually do have support of your people, and you can build like a country that has, the difference is the concept of state, isn't it? And why it exists allows these countries to react like that, opposed to an imperialist country that's like, you know, ooh, do we really want to, you know, the main objective of the US military isn't to be a military, really. It's to just like trick other countries into buying their shit. If they can do that, they can sustain themselves, right? Whereas it's that age-old argument that like if the US suddenly goes out of existence, like every country that's bought American military technology is like, that's obsolete, because you've got to get permission from whichever US company you've bought it from just to turn the key, right? You've got to go, can we take this plane out on an exercise? And some American company's gone, yes, you're allowed to fly your own plane now, right? Or however, you know, whatever rules they've set up to close that. It's like all the stuff the Taliban inherited, right? You can fly it once, but now you need an American maintenance crew to come and maintenance it.
Yeah, you've got to buy a specific screw for your helicopter.
You've got to buy a specific crew, and if the US government can't, if that company goes under, that's it, right? So whereas the opposite is in the anti-imperialist world, which has been the same for the last
10 years,
just over 110 years now. Compare Soviet technology to capitalist technology, and Soviet technology is built to last, built to do a job. You still have, you know, it's the choice of the freedom fighter around the world is to use Soviet stuff. You know, a T-34 was built to be used, whereas capitalist stuff is built to just be sold. That's the difference. Well, the US wants to sell Australia 150 tanks. They don't want Australia to be able to use those tanks. They just want to sell them. And once they've sold them, they then want them to go obsolete after a couple of years. They can sell them another 150, right? That's how they work.
But it's everything, though, isn't it? I mean, like the AK-47, literally created to be the Soviet workhorse. There is AK-47.
What I'm getting at is the reason for that is it's because of the response to the existence of the country, and that's how it came into creation. Like the Soviet Union hasn't got time to create this like perfectly tuned military machine. It's just got to get as many out of the factories as possible, because like Nazis are committing genocide out in Belarus, right? And they're getting closer and closer to Moscow. So we've got to build as many cheap tanks, AK-47s, you know, whatever, because that's the threat that they're facing against. The imperialist,
that's what I'm saying. Like,
imperialist military has always been the opposite. Now, like Soviet Union was kicking out like 1,400 tanks a month, right? And they weren't. People think that like it was made by the state, right? And it was this great state effort, but it wasn't. Like if you look at if you look at a Soviet tank, a picture of a Soviet tank, or any machinery from World War II, and just if you can read the side of it, it'll say like St. Petersburg Youth Communist Party or something, because they're the people who donated or whipped round to fund the building of like tank number 1240 of that month. Do you get what I mean? So like these items come into existence from a different place to where imperialist military equipment comes from, and that's why they offer that response, and it's unbeatable. And that's why the US has never been able to respond to things like the Vietnam War, and that's why they get spanked by Vietnamese farmers who started with pitchforks, because as soon as they've held out enough time for Russian tech to appear on the battlefield, they've consolidated their position, right? And it's too late. That's what I'm getting at.
But it's the idea again of just capitalism's largest problem in today's world, which is probably planned obsolescence, where everything that they build has an expiry date on it by design as a way to sell more product, right? Whereas as you rightly point out, there are AK-47s from the Vietnam War, from the very first creation, that are still working today, that 50, 60, 70, 80 years later still working today. There are China is still flying J-8 fighter jets, which are copies of the MiG-15, which were first built in 1950. There are still J-8s in the People's Liberation Army Air Force still flying, because these things are built to last. They're built for purpose, built to last.
Built to last, built to be serviced, built to be upgraded. If it's not that like the original piece is still working. It's like the ability to maintain it. That's the difference. Go on anyway.
And in the province of Taiwan, they have like the F-16s, which are only like half that age, they're just falling apart.
The F-16V, the one that fell out of the air the other day. Sorry, I'll let you come in now after this, Vito. Let me just finish this thought I've got. Literally is the most upgraded, the most modernized form of F-15, and I believe they only started coming into the new block of them only started coming into production in 2019. So it's literally 3 years old, this plane, and it cost them like hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's fallen out of the sky because the pilots were tired.
But not only that, right? As soon as the US decides that they don't want to let Taiwan use it anymore, they'll just like remotely make sure it never works again.
Just turn it off.
and not only that, if the US collapsed, then you would be left with some obsolete piece of kit. It's like they've done the same with farming equipment, haven't they? Like farmers have, if farmers like crack their tractors, you've got like John Deere trying to put them in jail for like 500 years in the US, right? That's just how capitalism's operating at the minute, isn't it? And that's why you're seeing these countries choose the opposite side. And that's what I was talking about when, I think it was earlier on, someone else mentioning, one of you two were talking, the Soviet Union were selling equipment to anybody who were getting either refused by the US, didn't want to buy US equipment, or were banned from buying US equipment, right? Like Pakistan were flying MiGs, Egypt were flying MiGs, etc, etc, etc. Syrian war using the T-34. You're going to choose that technology over Western military tech because it's more reliable, and that's why the West is in the position it's in now, because capitalism, like you say, Tom, the contradictions, they've like shot themselves in the foot, haven't they? They got to rethink their entire like stockpile of response now.
Also, it's worth pointing out the price differences as well. Like I think recently, Denmark or Finland or one of these Nordic periphery countries near Russia bought something like 35 F-35s, right? And it cost them like $5 billion. Okay, so it cost you $5 billion to get these 30 planes, right? Okay, let's say each of these F-35s successfully manages to shoot down 2 Russian planes for every one that they lose. Russia is prepared to lose 70 planes to kill 35 F-35s, and they will do it
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, and I
you
mean
know,
that's what I was talking about with the USSR and their response, right? They're prepared. It's a numbers game, isn't it? That's what beats the
yeah,
imperialists, and that's what's beaten the
yeah, yeah.
imperialists throughout history. Whether it's the Russian Civil War against the Whites, whether it's World War II, whether it's the Vietnamese War, whether it's Cuba, whatever. It's the willpower plus. Well, we'll just keep throwing everything we've got at you until your resources are drained. And it's almost the same as what Sammy was talking about. This is why Israel is acting erratically, because they don't know what to expect now, because they're surrounded by countries that are self-determining themselves to the point where they're just not going to be like, all right, yeah, cool, you keep bombing our ports because we can't do anything about it. And Kazakhstan's the same, right? The fact that CTSO just responded, like Putin's now saying we're just done with messing around with the US trying to infect in Russian society. We're not gonna like pretend it's not happening. Do you know what I mean? We're just gonna stop it from happening.
I think Russia learned its lesson, right? The first time round when they watched a colour revolution happen, well, not the first time, but the first most recent time was Maidan with Ukraine. They saw it coming, but in 2014, Russia was nowhere near as powerful as it is today, diplomatically and militarily. So
Maidan was the first big one since the collapse of the USSR as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, even though Russia saw it coming, I'm not saying that Russia didn't know it was happening. Russia couldn't respond to it. They were not in a position to respond to it without being basically swarmed by the imperialists, right? The second big colour revolution was Syria. Now, in this one, Russia saw it coming. Russia waited to be invited in, and then Russia basically saved the Assad government from complete annihilation.
Not only that, Putin vetoed Western intervention, didn't he, in the UN, made sure that the West couldn't get anywhere near Syria. If he had not vetoed, then I remember it causing controversy at the time, because it was like the first real like act of defiance that he'd done.
Yeah, it? And then basically you've got this next series of events where Russia is like, right, no more shit. We don't want another Syria where we have to basically go into a completely destroyed country, which is clearly what the colour revolutionaries in Kazakhstan wanted, because they were burning down government buildings, they were beheading police officers, they immediately ransacked armories and took up arms against the state. It was a very quick and violent attack on the state institutions, right? Because as we all know, political power grows from the barrel of a gun. We all know this, as do fascists. Fascists know this as well as communists. They tried to do it, but Russia basically said, right, we've got a choice here. We're now strong enough to defeat this. We will be invited in. It's likely that Russia basically told Tokayev to invoke the CSTO ordinance, which then gave Russia and the CSTO member states the ability to go in. And also, Kazakhstan it's kind of like Ukraine insofar as it's a extremely vital border area. If it became completely friendly to American interests, as opposed to being neutral or in the Eurasian camp, then it would be a perfect launching pad into both China's Xinjiang province and Russia's. I believe it connects to near the. It's not the Caucasus, is it? It's what's the Russian? Is it Siberia? I think it's near Novosibirsk. I could be wrong about that. My Russian geography is not fantastic, but regardless, it's a fantastic launching pad into both Russia and China, which is obviously what the USA wanted out of this arrangement. And Russia was like, nah, we are not letting this happen this time round. We're not letting a Maidan happen. Sorry, let me just finish this thought, Sammy, 1 sec. We're not letting a Maidan happen, and we're not even going to let a Syria happen. We're gonna stop this. We're gonna nip this in the bud far before it gets a chance to spread and happen, basically. And they did successfully. Go on, Sammy.
Not only that, but it's literally the coronary artery, the neck artery of the Belt and Road Initiative. And concerning taking in mind the $400 billion deal with Iran, Kazakhstan is the main route for pretty much all land-based routes or land routes for the BRI. So that would have a major impact on Iran as well, and hence Syria and the conflicts in the region over there.
There's always like people will always, Westerners especially will always dismiss like this idea that geopolitics happens to. People always say it's because of the Belt and Road Initiative. Well, of course it is. Like, look at imperialist history. UK and France like declared war on Egypt because Egypt dared to nationalise its canal. Right, that the Brits and French had been treating as their own for however many years before. So it's always about some sort of like, you know, boring trade route or road access or
what people don't understand about the Belt and Road Initiative, generally speaking, is that it is the number one greatest threat to American economic hegemony throughout the world today. There is no parallel to it since perhaps the common form economic.
Now, why would they? Why? So if they're gonna, I mean, I know the USA kind of stayed out of that conflict because it served their own interests to just let Britain and France make idiots of themselves on the world stage. But if the global imperialist is willing to declare on war on Egypt over just one canal, like think about what it's willing to do for something like that, right? People in the West, because you can't see the Belt and Road, people are like, oh, they're not going to do all that because of Belt and Road. Well, they are, right?
Well, the West didn't give a shit about China when Hu Jintao was in power. The West didn't really initially give a shit about China when Xi Jinping came to power. It was when Xi Jinping started making big statements and started coming up with things like the Belt and Road Initiative. The BRI memorandum was signed in 2013 or 2014, right? I think it was 2013. The very first memoranda was signed for the BRI. Obama's Pivot East, which is the realignment of American foreign policy targeted towards Asia, was 2013. There's no coincidences in geopolitics. There is no coincidence in geopolitics. This didn't happen because Obama was a wise man who saw it coming. He saw the threat to American financial hegemony. And when you look at it, American financial hegemony is all they've got. This is why America uses sanctions to strangle other countries, because they can only defeat extremely weak states in a direct war, like Saddam's Iraq, right? It took a global coalition of 30 nations to defeat Iraq.
All the Western powers as well. To defeat little old, backwards Iraq.
Yeah, exactly.
The most corrupt government in the world at that point, arguably.
Yeah, and there was literally soldiers throwing down their arms in Iraq and running away from the American imperialists. Of course they would do that. I would do that in the same situation. But what I'm saying is, America doesn't have military hegemony. They might think they do. They don't. They have financial hegemony. If it came to an actual ground war between Russia and America, America would lose without the use of nuclear warheads. If it came to any kind of conflict with China, they would lose without the use of nuclear warheads. I say without the use of nuclear warheads because if they use nuclear warheads, it's game over for everyone. Everyone loses. So, that's their trump card, that they've got this nuclear kind of trump card. But otherwise, all America has in its bag of tricks is the domination of the financial system. If they lose that domination of the global financial system, they lose their place in the world, and they can't allow that, which is why the BRI is such a massive threat to them. And it's why every single color revolution, every single civil war, every single propaganda piece that we've seen in the past 7-8 years has been tailored to BRI countries, specifically China. If it's not about China, it's about one of China's allies. And if it's not about one of China's allies, it's about one of the countries that is siding with China geopolitically against the USA by joining the BRI. Mm-hmm. It's a constant stream of shit. And I think people
now America is hitting a 7% inflation just recently, and if America starts to, I don't think America is going to back down of giving money to their allies, but if they continue to print money, there would be a significant downturn in America's domestic ability to give wages to workers, and
It's a fine line, right?
yeah, no, I mean, America crossed that line, and because of what Trump did to, it's just what the Trump administration did was pulling all the resources into a lot of different military projects, and right now we can kind of see that people, like the average workers in America, doesn't have millions. They only got like thousands to pay to.
Do you mean over their lifetime, right?
Yeah, over the lifetimes, and it's
Well, if you're going to run a consumer society, you need to be making sure that your consumers have got money to consume with, right?
Yeah, and America, like, its economy is built on consumerism, like heavily and also subsidized subsidized in financial hegemony, and we're beginning to see that it's a sort of like a self destructed.
Well, yeah, it's exactly that. It's not kind of like that, Vito. It's exactly like that.
I would point out though, like, that rather than say it's self-destructed, we have to give Deng Xiaoping his credit here. He is the man who's single-handedly engineered the destruction of the American financial system by basically opening up and saying, right, come and move all your businesses to China, come and move all of your factories to China, we'll do all your work for cheap.
Yeah, and not just that, but remember, like, the 2008 financial crises, is that because most of the money that the U.S. engineered isn't even worth anything. They only kind of like putting all their they sold worthless bonds and a lot of that created the housing that sort of like killed the housing bubbles and allowed the and sort of like causing a free fall in the housing economy, and Obama, of course, bailed out the bankers.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with Vito there, Tom. I think you can give Deng credit, right? But I think 2008 is the pivotal moment for the West. I think that's the West. The West didn't react to 2008 in the way that, I mean, even the capitalists reacted in the wrong way, right? They should have never just like bailed the bankers out and like let them forget. What they should have done is something more like what Roosevelt did, right? In America.
A New Deal.
A New Deal, right? That was the solution they had to do at the time, and they didn't. That's why you see in America trying desperately to do it now. Like, the alternate came to, like, Obama was like the extreme of neoliberalism, right? And Trump was a response to that from the national bourgeois that was like, look, our foreign policy is destroying us. Trump had promised to like clean the swamp of these sort of policy makers.
End the wars.
Get rid of people like Blinken. That was Trump's. When Trump said he was going to clean the swamp, what he was talking about was people like Blinken that had been keeping the US in Afghanistan for like the last 15 years before, like umming and ahhing and never giving a reason why, but whilst pocketing from the profits of it. So Trump was put in to do that, and then obviously he just didn't do that. He just carried on more of the same, and even going as far as like, murdering Soleimani, and it's arguable that he was worse than other American presidents, but he certainly continued American imperialism. But he didn't clean the swamp, did he? He didn't. So we've now got Joe Biden, who is almost like, it's a very...
He's a legacy Obama candidate. That's all.
Exactly,
Biden is.
but like what? So the American elite needed to clear the swamp, and then Trump didn't clear the swamp, but they've just let the swamp get back in power, haven't they? And that's like the reason why I think they're so ineffective. I don't think it comes down to an individual act that China did 30 years ago and all this. I think that plays part in it, obviously, but it's just the setup of the capitalist system. It's the reason for this.
It's like the
if 1920 was what is it Marx said? History is first a tragedy and then a farce, right? That's a Marx quote. If 1920 is the farce, because it's almost like America didn't learn from 1920. The New Deal happened, and the American capitalist class, after like 1 or 2 years of the New Deal, then started attacking Roosevelt, didn't they? Because he was like keeping it going too long. We want to like make unfettered profit again. They didn't learn from that mistake, and then 90 years later, 2008 happens as a farce, right? How are they going to respond?
But what I'm saying is like the industrial base that America did have. America had an incredible industrial base, and they sold all of that out for a quick profit. They were like, okay, well, we can make money from this new quote unquote liberalized China.
Well, their plan was to break China, wasn't it? In the same way they broke the USSR, right? And then
shot themselves in the foot with that. But
keep China as its factory.
But then when the financial crash came in 2008, who was the one who went around and bought up all of the American dollar bonds? Who basically bailed the West out, but also set themselves up with a great deal of reserve currency. China went in, they bought up all of America's bonds, they bought up all of America's financial assets and said, like, right, okay, look, we're going to bail you out of this. And
they bailed out the world,
it's almost
much. The entire
they did,
world.
but it wasn't like out of a kind of an act of good-heartedness. This was a complete act of economic pragmatism, because this has allowed China's rise to go so smoothly. And whereas a country like
it shits Republicans up, right? You still get Republicans going, and if China calls in bonds, they're going to wreck America. So
yeah, and they could.
Mm-hmm.
It's the nuclear option.
The nuclear option. Anyway, carry on. Finish what you're saying. Tom, finish what you're saying.
Oh, sorry. So like, basically, what I'm not saying that America isn't to blame for its own problems, because obviously it is. The capitalist system is an Ouroboros. It's a snake that eats its own tail. Essentially, it's always ever consuming, and it won't stop until it's eaten itself into a hole. But as you pointed out rightly, we are in 2008 to 2020 has been a repeat of the 1920s, a kind of a mirror image. And without this New Deal, the reason Roosevelt did the New Deal was to save capitalism, right? Mm-hmm. He had he didn't, because
he had like Goebbels loved the New Deal. It was like Germany needs one too.
Yeah, because you've got you've got mass amounts of unemployed people, hungry people, workers, angry people, mass people joining the Communist Party. It was the largest resurgence in communism in the USA before, and that's why they had to do McCarthyism, obviously. Mm-hmm. But what happened now is, we're seeing a mirror image of this, but without. I mean, Joe Biden's response to the 2020 version of the 1920s, the Roaring '20s Part 2 Electric Boogaloo, is Build Back Better, which has already been. Biden has already come out and said this has failed. Build Back Better has failed, right? They've already acknowledged that their New Deal has collapsed. They can't get funding for it because, as Vito points out, their dollar is worthless. It has, ever since Nixon unpegged the dollar from the gold standard, which was a way to basically make the Vietnam War affordable. Essentially, the US dollar has existed. Its value has existed purely based on the fact that people believe it has value.
That's what we learned with that episode on MMT, isn't it? It's like the key principle of imperialism is making sure your money is actually fucking worth something, right? America's like
of
a
course.
victim of its own game here. In what you're saying,
It's a Ponzi scheme. America is a Ponzi scheme. It's a fucking pyramid selling system. That's all America is. It's a nationwide Ponzi scheme. Americans call them Ponzi schemes. Brits call them pyramid schemes or pyramid selling schemes. That's literally what it is. People believe the American. It's like an cryptocurrency or an NFT or something. They don't have any real world value. They only have value because people believe they have value, right?
Yeah.
Now, the only reason that the American dollar has so much clout, economic clout, is because there's not been an alternative to it. The ruble could never compete when the USSR was in power because Russia has never had a fantastic economic base. But China, throughout history, has always been the economic capital of the world. It's why Britain had to destroy China with opium. It's why the Western powers wanted to carve China up in the Eight Nation Alliance. It's why all of these attacks on China have happened throughout history, is because China, with the largest population in the world, has always been the financial center of the world, and it's regaining its rightful place as the financial center of the world in the 2020s. It's recovered from its century of humiliation, it's resurging, and now there is a viable alternative to the dollar that has actual real world backed material reasons to support it. Like, you might as well go with the UN, because if you've got the UN, you can buy Chinese products, which is what everyone buys anyway, because China makes all the fucking products. You can if you use the UN, you're on a friendly terms with China.
again, even the UN is the US getting played at its own game, right? The US only created the UN to try and control the world, and now it can't even control that.
And like what Russia and China did, like they vetoed several resolutions from the rest of the members of.
Is this
the
in the
UN.
UN, right?
Like,
You're talking about actual UN.
Yeah.
Decision
No, I'm
making.
talking about like the intervention strategies.
Right, go on.
Area. Like Russia and China are both vetoed the resolutions to intervene several times, and that because Russia have been asked to help out Syria's insurgency problem by Bashar al-Assad. That has been gaining foothold over the years, and also China, because and with their investing their money into infrastructures, and that too has been going fruitful. And I'm just saying that it's like the UN itself is as an institution to map out the universal values. That's great, but it doesn't really do much to holding really actual countries into account of what they've done. And
a prime example of that is the fact that the world repeatedly demands that the US ends the blockade on Cuba, and the US just ignores it.
Yeah. And also, like, just recently, I think Sammy had just been talking about Yemen and the UAE. Just recently, the UN Security Council on Friday condemned the seizure of a UAE ship and demanded that the Houthi rebels release the vessel and its crew. As we talked about, UAE has been in Saudi's part of the Saudis' intervention of Yemen, that is seemingly called the greatest humanitarian crisis, and it doesn't call out for as a humanitarian crisis for nothing, because of like a lot of the conflicts that emerges from that particular crises is that the Saudi wanted more expansionist, have this expansionist policy, just similar to America,
Yeah. And who's behind demanding that a UAE ship gets released, right? I mean, we even have adverts on Western TV.
And I have to say, the Saudi have enjoyed a great deal of the sort of like the handle to say whatever it wants to say in the midst of the crisis in Yemen.
Well, remember that picture with Trump with the Saudis, where they stood like with their hands on the world, like good fascists like to pose, like, right?
Yeah.
But one thing is though, like if there was like kind of an international media of the same caliber that we have today during the Opium Wars, there would be like articles denouncing China's seizure of British opium chests and the burning of British opium. We would see the same thing. The victimized country is always demonized for taking back or trying to break blockades that are literally imposed upon themselves, like China did with the British ships at the start of the first Opium War. This is the kind of same shit we've seen throughout history. You know, the imperialists, the pirates will come in and fuck you up.
And the West can't do, and I mean that the West can't do anything to sort of remedy the situations. Is that because they themselves initially provided large sums of resources and also money to sort of like to tell countries like Latin America, to tell the region, the Latin American countries, Central America, to not give in to the Chinese project, and instead they like a lot of them doesn't really materialize because it's either because of the policy, like their policies with the leaders in that hasn't gone too smoothly, and now because China was able to get Nicaragua, they were able to get Syria into signing the memorandum of the BRI. They're like, we can see in the next 20-25 years that not just in a rhetorical sense that they will be able to get rich and prosperous, but to be able to have the extraordinary amount of projects that were able to get it to get done without any sort of like without any sort of like the
you're not going to get messed over by the US. Basically, they're going to What you're talking about is self-determination, right?
Yeah,
it's a different actual self-determination. That's the difference, isn't it? That comes with these. You're not at the end of an imperialist like boot on your neck, right? That has to set up like a comprador government. I mean, look at how the British Empire dismantled itself, right? I read something interesting this week, and it was somebody said, hold on, Vito. Somebody said, just look at India, right? If India is what the imperialist class want the world to look like, right? And the British kind of left India perfectly because they destroyed the communist movement, and then they had Gandhi, who's like the comprador, who they could leave behind, who would be a willing, I'm going to let capitalism and let India become the call center of the world kind of, politician that will do anything to get rich himself and famous, whatever.
I mean, China and India are perfect analogs, really, because they're similar-sized countries, both got similar-sized populations, they both got similar agricultural and industrial bases.
China and India, and maybe like Russia and Britain post World War One. They're similar.
I'd say like China and India are perfectly analogous countries because you've got two countries that started at pretty much the same time, both around 1949 as their modern incarnations. One started as a socialist state,
Both
the other
victims of
started,
British imperialism.
yes, both destroyed by British imperialism. Now, China is quite rightly skyrocketed back to its most powerful position. It's kind of its historical position in the world as the financial center of the world. You know, Zhongguo, the middle country, the middle kingdom, the middle of the world, literally. India was also a very powerful economic country throughout history before it was completely balkanized, destroyed, and carved up, looted. Exactly. And now you've got a kind of perfect analogy of the difference between capitalism and socialism. Which country is successful? Which one has defeated poverty? Which one has a thriving economy? Which one has its own industrial and military construction?
Which one has
bases?
food security? Which one has its own sovereign currency and military?
Yes, exactly. I mean, look at, for example, like one perfect example is China builds 2 aircraft carriers in 10 years, right? From scratch, without any technology, anything like this. India has been building 1 aircraft carrier, the Vikrant, for the past 10 years.
Not only the carriers, but the ports, the factories build the stuff, you know, all from scratch, because the West is refused to sell them that stuff.
I mean, the thing is, like, you can use any kind of metric, but I like to use the carriers because they're pretty much exactly the same product, right?
If a nation is, I mean, it's the same with the USSR, right? Under Stalin, if a nation is at a point where it can build military equipment to the point where it can take on its aggressor, or not even take it on, but just stand up against it, right? Then that's true self-determination, is it not?
Yeah.
So you know, the ability to build just an aircraft carrier is enough, but the fact that they can build, you know, at double the speed the US can and at half the cost. I mean, these are the things that matters in the real world, right? You can have as many New York Times articles to trick like workers on in America as you want, but it's brass like facts that matter, isn't it? And it's their ability to actually outproduce and just the fact that the US has got to go to China if it wants to try and fight, right? Because China will just sit there and exist the US out of existence. So that's the world we're living in right now, right? And it is all because of 2008. Has anybody got anything they want to say before we end? Because we've not touched on winners and losers, but we'll bring it up next week. I kind of think this show has been about winners and losers in a way, without it being about winners and losers.
I think we just give all give a country or countries that we think has been a winner.
People.
Yeah, okay.
I can't remember.
And just give a brief. Let's not discuss it. Let's just give everyone just give an answer. What's your winner? What's your loser?
So, my losers of 2021 are Westerners living under COVID, because not through any fault of their own, but just because of how ineffective the West has. Taken on COVID. We're 3 years into it now. The UK's saying get used to it for another 6 or whatever. It's ridiculous. People's lives are on hold, you know. So I think the Westerners have lost out. We're losing out on time, you know. Life's short. You only get one life, and 3 years of that have gone down the drain in the West to COVID now. So the losers, I think, are the Westerners living under COVID. Winners, let's think about this. I'll let you answer while I think about my winner. Go on, Sammy.
All right. Go on.
What do you say?
I was going to say, like, Cuba to start off with. They've come up with like 2 vaccines, and they are one of the highest vaccination rates in the entire world, not just Latin America.
Nice. Well, I'm gonna in fact choose my winner to be just like the.
Oh, it has to be just one?
Yeah, because we're just ending the show. So
okay.
My winner from 2021 is going to be the Palestinian resistance for that awesome display back in May when Israel thought it could push them around, and they just like sustained it for like a month, and the whole world was on Palestine's side for once. It was almost like everything changed, right, since that event. You can be an open, free Palestine guy now. because all you got to do is go, well, just look at what happened back in May 2021. So my winners are the Palestine resistance, because I think they've set a ball rolling which it's going to be hard to stop. So they've won. Go on, Sammy, your winners and losers. Then we'll do Tom and Vito.
My winners and losers, well, my winner will be Yemen. Like,
Nice.
obviously, I'd say the Palestinian
They
resistance.
turned
but I
round
think
well.
Yemen, yeah, definitely. I'd say they definitely turned out really well, and I think this year would be the nail in the coffin for the Saudis the Saudis in general, really, not just the Saudis in Yemen.
Mm-hmm.
And the losers, I think, well, obviously the Saudis, as well as American puppets throughout most of the world, really.
Yeah, just American puppets.
Yeah.
Being an American puppet, I mean, it's kind of true. Look at Australia. They're like the most puppet of puppet.
And its incompetent leader.
Exactly. Go on, Vito. Your two winners and your winner and loser.
My winner would be. It's a very unusual answer. I have to choose El Salvador because it get to do two things at once. Essentially, it wanted to get itself out of the American dollar hegemony with I know it's going to piss some people off, but it's going to do favors with China and also have like its own quasi its own unique economic interest that if it works, it can do like its own financial market that can actually improve lives in El Salvador for the El Salvador people, and the losers the losers would be Xia Yingmen because
he's always a fucking loser.
Yeah, I view Xi's government as like the money, the gatekeeping, the financial gatekeeping for Central American and Latin American countries. As if you have seen the news lately, before Honduras government turned from right wing to the left wing, the right wing leader essentially visited visited Taiwan, and he left it with a bag of cash. That was meant for enriching his own government, but because of like the winning streak from Xiomara Castro, who led the left wing party, so it is essentially she might be going to go for China instead of Taiwan, which is just a way of saying maybe
another loss for the frogs, right?
Yeah, another loss for the frogs. Not just Honduras, mind you, but also Nicaragua. And
the list is getting shorter, right?
Yeah, the list of it used to be 15, but now it's getting.
How many countries? Okay, we'll come back to this at the end of this year, and we'll see how many countries are still on that decreasing list of countries. Tom, your two before we wrap up.
I just want to say before I begin that I'm really glad we've all chosen different winners and different losers, because I've also got two different ones that no one's said yet. So my biggest loser of 2021 is Lithuania, the country of Lithuania.
Yeah.
They were exposed as the biggest and most pathetic US lapdogs in the world. They not even lapdogs, but like attack dogs, right? The USA sent them forwards against the Chinese dragon. They sent little old Lithuania forwards to go and recognize Taiwan as an independent country, right? One of the only countries to even make moves. They didn't do it, but they made moves in the direction of recognizing Taiwan's autonomy by allowing a de facto embassy that was of a higher diplomatic level than the normal diplomatic missions Taiwan is kind of allowed under the One China policy. So China basically said, okay, no more trade for you. And Lithuania's entire economy collapsed like almost overnight. Germany backstabbed Lithuania and said, "Yep, we'll basically take in all of the Chinese trade that went through Lithuania. We'll take that off you." So they were backstabbed by their NATO and EU ally. They were then
like the US did that to Australia, right? As well.
Exactly. Yeah. It's capitalism, isn't it? It's a fucking cutthroat game, my man. Cutthroat game. So and as of last week, Lithuania has basically had to apologize and undo all of.
Didn't their president apologize?
Well, apparently the president wasn't even in favor of the regulations, and it was kind of like a coalition of like an IPAC-based coalition, but for
it was, wasn't it? That's
Lithuania.
Exactly what it was. A load of
basically went over the president's head. Obviously, US assets went forwards with this policy. It was actually extremely unpopular in Lithuania as well, as a poll revealed last week, showing that only 16% of people approved of this move because of how much damage it's done to the average Lithuanian's wallet, which is hilarious and sad. Sad for the Lithuanian people because they don't deserve their government fucking them over like this in the name of some geopolitical game. And hilarious,
not just for the US government as well. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, but that's where my hilarious side was going to come in. It's hilarious because like it shows how pointless it is to be an American ally, right? It's kind of, it shows it in its fullest capacity how useless and detrimental being a US ally is. Whereas if you look at the kind of the assistance, compare it with Kazakhstan, which is a Chinese and Russian ally, literally in some cases, because they're actually allied with Russia in military pacts like the CSTO. We saw how being a Russian ally directly benefited them because their government was saved from complete collapse, and also being a Chinese economic ally has saved them because they are a member of the Belt and Road Initiative. Compare that with how being an American ally is with Lithuania, and we can see obviously and clearly which is the better path for any sovereign state. So that's my loser, Lithuania, the entire country of Lithuania, taking the fat L on in 2021. The biggest winner would have to be. This is again a bit of a. It's a bit of a wider scope than what you guys have all said because you've given specific countries. I'm gonna say the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So the economic alliance that basically ties together all of the quote unquote Eurasian states. We've seen the accession of Iran to the SCO this year.
Isn't India even in that? Even India
is even in.
Yeah, I'm gonna say even India knows where the money's really at.
They know which side the bread is buttered on, and India as well has actually taken a very firm stance against war with China, despite being in the Quad. They've said that they made America say, when Modi met Biden last year, I believe, Modi basically stated that he would withdraw from the Quad if Biden basically said that it was a military alliance. So they had to say that it was not a military alliance, which basically precluded India from having to take military action against China. So this
I'm sorry, but as somebody who as somebody who has ties to India, I think it's hilarious. I think it's utterly hilarious that someone like Modi can dictate to the US government. Shows how weak they are, right?
Yes, exactly. But the reason that the SCO are winners is because more and more countries are joining. It's basically a parallel structure to kind of like what's the Western equivalent, like
the EU.
not so much the EU, because it's an economic alliance, but it's also taken on new dimensions, such as diplomatic assistance for all SCO member states.
The G whatever.
The G8. Yeah. The G8 or the G7, exactly. That's a good analogy. However, we're also seeing, as a result of this Kazakhstan unrest, Xi Jinping has made it clear that he would like the CSTO, of which China is an observer nation, right? So they're not a member of the CSTO, but they observe and basically witness the decisions made by CSTO alliance countries, including the ones made by over Kazakhstan. Xi Jinping basically made it clear in his recent call with Putin that he would like the CSTO to become the military arm of this SCO, which is enormous. That's an enormous thing that has not been picked up on in basically any Western media, because essentially, if that means that if Iran were attacked and this system were in place, which it isn't at the moment, but it's an idea that's being drafted, then Russia, Belarus, Armenia, Kazakhstan, many nations would have to come to Iran's aid. It would be an incredible blow for American military hegemony. So that's why, for me, the SCO is the winner of 2021.
Yeah, and even in saying that, right? Don't forget that like the British and American military are already too scared to like sail into the South China Sea proper. They'll go close to it and then turn round, and then the media will write that they're sailing there, because they'll sail towards it. The media will be like, the US is sailing towards China, right? But they'll not report that they didn't actually go anywhere near it and turned around before, because they're scared of it, right? But yeah, nice, good choice. Good choices all round. Good show. I mean, we're sorry for the interruption earlier. It was the background music. He's flagged it up as like stealing someone else's content through spam or something. It was the background music Sammy chose. So, Sammy, you owe everybody viewing right now 50p. For the hassle.
There was also a comment on the previous stream just as we went down, which said, "Oh no, the CIA has got them," which I thought was quite funny.
Yeah. No, it's not the CIA. We just did a naughty and played too much capitalist music without.
It's not the CIA. It's Sammy. Sammy's the problem here.
Yeah. Anyway, don't forget, subscribe, like, share. Check us out on Twitter if you're not already following us on there. Press subscribe on our YouTube. Join our Patreon. Join our YouTube membership. If you join Patreon or the YouTube membership, you get access to Discord when we have guests on the show, because us guys right now aren't famous enough to have hangouts, but when we have guests on the show, you can hang out with them afterwards if you're a patron. We've also got merch. If you want some merch, slide into the DMs and we'll point you over to that. We'll be back next Thursday with Esh's show, historically, on imperialism. Tom, thanks for getting up. Vito, thanks for getting up. It's like, what time for you two now? 8 a.m. nearly?
8:17.
Yeah. 8. Yeah, same.
Nice.
Yeah, because we're in the same glorious country, Vito.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, lads and lasses and everybody else listening. That's it for this week. We'll let this music play. You guys say bye while I'm just like getting this music turned up. See you later.
So yeah, everyone, thanks for tuning in.
See you later. Yeah, I will be there next week hopefully as well. Apologies for my lack of appearances lately, but it's been as a result of having to get up at an ungodly hour.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't realise we might like rib you for it, but you are getting up at like 6 a.m. to come and stream online to people. We're not getting paid to do this either, so
I've got to do a fucking full 12-hour day now.
Exactly, right. Harrison should be with us as well next week, so
awesome.
I guess look forward to that. I don't know why I said look forward to it. I know I sure am. See you later.
Try and sound like you actually are.
I'm hoping he's listening so he can get all annoyed at me for being sarcastic. But anyway, we'll see you later.
See you later.
See ya.